Even the darkness is not dark to you. Welcome back to Why Hope, the video series that explores reasons for hope in our day. This is season 9, which I've called God-verbs, looking at the ways the Bible represents God as doing things and looking at some of the things that he actively does. This week, we're looking at the God who pays attention. Now, I began with a fragment from Psalm 139. You might know that Psalm 139 is an exploration of the ways that God sees. You kind of get a sense, actually, that, quite frankly, that the psalmist is a bit uncomfortable because he knows that he can't hide from God. But today I want us to focus on the idea that God pays attention and that there is nothing, we cannot go too far, we cannot sink so low that God does not see and pay attention to our distress. And so, just to read more fully the fragment that I started with, the psalmist says this: "If I say, surely the darkness will cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you." I think there's a sense in which we can see the psalmist saying, however low I sink, even if I'm at the bottom of an abyss, even if I'm swamped by layers of depression or oppression, God, you can see that. You can pierce the darkness and you see and you pay attention. Now, the narratives of the Old Testament are full of stories just like that. I want to show you just a couple. So, first of all, let's talk about Hagar. Now, here I'm in Genesis 16, and Hagar has been, she's the victim of both Abraham and his wife Sarah, who have colluded to bring Hagar, their slave girl, into Abraham's bed in order to impregnate her for the purposes of propagating Abraham's line. She has no consent in this, she has no choice in this, and she's so badly treated that she runs away. And in Genesis 16, we read of an encounter that she has with God. So she's run away into the wilderness, and you don't go there unless you're really desperate. And it says, the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness. Now, there's a little Hebrew word play here, because the word spring is also the Hebrew word for eye. And so because eyes weep and springs, leak water, if you like. And so she comes to this eye in the desert, and there she is seen by God. And the angel of the Lord, which in this particular style of writing in the Old Testament really means God himself. And he addresses her directly, which no one yet in the story has done. And he calls her by name, which nobody yet in the story has done. And he asks her, he says, "Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, where have you come from? And where are you going?" And he has a conversation with her. He tells her to go back to her mistress. Some people struggle with that, and we would need to look more carefully to understand the reasons. But I think she's even though she's being ill-treated, she's safer there than she is in the desert, where she's about to die of hunger and thirst. For Hagar, certainly, this has been a positive encounter. And at the end of this encounter, we read these words: "So she named the Lord who spoke to her, 'You are El Roi,' and El Roi means God of seeing. For she said, 'Truly, here I have seen him who looks after me.'" This is the God who pays attention. He pays attention in particular to those who are put down, shoved around, ignored, overlooked, and harmed by others. The second story I want to take you to is the story of Hannah in 1 Samuel chapter 1. And Hannah, she's the wife of a probably reasonably wealthy man. So she's not poor in that sense, but she is overlooked in the sense that she has not been able to conceive. This was a great shame for women in that day. Her husband has taken a second wife, probably for the purposes of having children, and the second wife mocks Hannah because she's unable to conceive. And even her husband, who does his best, and I guess in the kind of convention of the ancient world is not a bad egg really, but he just doesn't understand the depth of her pain. But she discovers one who does understand the depth of her pain. Because she goes to the shrine, she prays to God, she meets the priest who speaks words of blessing to her eventually, once he also understands, he doesn't initially. And then we read these words: "In due time Hannah conceived and bore a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, I have asked him of the Lord." And Samuel, or Shmuel, which is more literally how it should be pronounced, means God has heard. Now, that was two examples of women whom God paid attention to. And of course, he doesn't just pay attention to women, but it's perhaps more surprising in that ancient world that God even pays attention to women. But another group he pays attention to is the poor. Let me read you two verses from the Proverbs. So the Proverbs are ways of advice, really, for living well, living in God's way, in God's world. And I'm going to read you a verse from Proverbs 22 and then a verse from Proverbs 23. "Do not rob the poor because they are poor, or crush the afflicted at the gate, for the Lord pleads their cause." Do not rob the poor because the Lord pleads their cause. And in the following chapter, "Do not remove an ancient landmark or encroach on the fields of orphans." This is the idea of moving a boundary stone in order to gain territory. So do not do these things, for their Redeemer is strong. He will plead their cause against you. And the writer of Proverbs here is using this sort of ancient idea, a kind of law court really, but the idea is God is on the side of those that others want to rob. God is on the side of those who are vulnerable. This is a really significant word. It's a very serious warning to those who might be inclined to harm those who are vulnerable. Another vulnerable group in the ancient world is, depending on what Bible translation you use, sometimes referred to as the alien or the stranger. And again, we read that God pays attention to how they are treated. Psalm 146, "The Lord watches over the strangers and he upholds the orphan and the widow." He is paying attention to how they are treated. And in Leviticus 19, so an extended section which is dealing with various matters of the law. But listen to this, Leviticus 19, "When an alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppress the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." So God says, on the basis of the fact that you are my people, that's the significance of "I am the Lord your God" at the end. He says, you will not oppress, you will not harm the stranger who lives among you. Rather, you will love them as you love yourself. God pays attention to how the poor, the vulnerable, the oppressed, the stranger, how they are treated. This is the God who pays attention. Going back, remember, to how the psalmist celebrated that in Psalm 139. "Even the darkness is not dark to you. There is nothing, there is no shadow that I can be cast into that you cannot see, that you cannot find me in." Now, all those things that the Old Testament tells us about God and the ways that we see him acting, we see all of those in the life of Jesus Christ. And I'm not going to go into that now, but have a read of the Gospels and discover for yourself how Jesus pays attention to those that others overlook or choose not to see or listen to. Ours is a God who pays attention. This is the God verb for this week, and this is another reason why we can have hope.